King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. So tonight on AEW Dynamite, you caught a rising star be crowned TNT champion. Sammy Guevara, since day one. That tells me a lot about AEW and the fact that they are in tune with the fact that even though they're bringing all these new stars in, that their eye is not off the prize. It's a symbolic gesture. It's important to see that tonight, a number of the stars that they had on stood out before we look at anything when it comes to the stars that have been brought in through AEW when it comes to Adam Cole, Bryan Danielson, and CM Punk. They didn't have the level of the importance that you saw where you look at MJF front and center with one of his heelish promos ever, and now him and Darby Allin are going to go tete-a-tete. You have Jungle Boy featured in a big match against Adam Cole. Doesn't win, but it's in a strong win. If even through defeat, he still looks stronger. Hell of a match they had. And Sammy Guevara, all his time in the Inner Circle, one of the first guys to wrestle on Dynamite. We all just saw where AEW, they have a vision. Obviously, Tony Khan knows where he wants to go with things. And the thought that Sammy Guevara was getting the chance to go ahead and be put here. And being one of the first of the pillars. That he was funny. MJF even called pillars out. Darby Allin, Jungle Boy, Sammy Guevara, and MJF. He actually called 4 pillars. So in that promo prior to the TNT title match says a lot. And then Sammy Guevara winning tonight, that just puts icing on the cake about the direction of the company. That the people they brought on, you're not going to have the IWC, the Internet Wrestling Community, influence overcoming because of some instant gratification. That is the focus of my program tonight. This has to be addressed. And I've been hearing enough when it comes to how things are being done on Raw and SmackDown in terms of Monday Night Football and for now the new fall season coming into play, leading up to the draft, and what WWE has been doing right now over the last couple of weeks. What they've been doing, a bit of a hot shot booking kind of feel, and what they've been doing in general since the live crowds came back. It's only been a couple of months still, but there's a whole lot being said what's happening here. And with all the changes that are going on when it comes to the free agents that have moved over. So now let's go put all this into focus. And I have to say it like this. Now, I don't know how much of the internet wrestling community that really does follow like every fan podcast out there, every major wrestling podcast out there, the ones that are going to the shows, but they only go to the shows if it's like kind of like a thing to do. How much of them are actually buying the merchandise? How much of them are they actually doing things to help lure more audience into the mix? What you're seeing of the IWC is a residual of what is left of the Attitude Era and those that might have followed along after that. Let's be clear about it. So I was around in my prime watching the Attitude Era, watching more Nitro than Raw, more Thunder than SmackDown. But, you know, I'd still watch both. But for me, I never put myself as a loyalist to the WWE brand. Never have. I've always watched it. I've always enjoyed it. But I've always looked at it as that's the mainstream, and I'm a nonconformist. And my thing is I want to enjoy other wrestling because I've always enjoyed other wrestling. As far as I can remember, I would watch NWA or watch World Championship Wrestling when it was just a TV show. World Class, ESPN 4 o'clock on Wednesdays, I think it was. And then watching AWA Wrestling on ESPN around 4 o'clock at my grandmother's house growing up. I remember that. Watching UWF at 11 o'clock at night after Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling on WBFS Channel 33, Miami Superstation, back in the 80s. I still remember watching Pro Wrestling This Week with Joe Pedicini and Gordon Solie, wasn't it? I forget. Was that who it was? And watching all that. And enjoying so much difference in wrestling. Championship Wrestling from Florida. I remember watching that. all of that, I was very much interested in wrestling, among other things, because that was one of the true sports I actually kind of really did follow along with, and enjoyed a lot. And then after I got out of college, it got really easy. During college, I missed all the really tough times of watching, the bad years of WWE because I was in college. Like, I missed the really bad years. I was in school from 94 to 98. But at the end of college, that's when I really got myself, in 96, 97, I got my hands on a black box, my Scientific Atlanta box, and watching pay-per-views, all of them. So I was truly tuned in to everything of the Attitude Era, everything of the Nitro Era, everything of the ECW. ECW I caught on, I want to say late 96, early 97. Sunshine Network, 2 o'clock at night on Saturday mornings, going into Sunday morning. Saturday nights, 2 a.m. Watching that as well. And then for a little while, MLW after that. And so I knew of people that would talk amongst different circles. We didn't have social media. And then when you started seeing people making the word of mouth was so rampant, and people would draw other people to go to the shows, you would see camaraderie. You would see more people talking about wrestling, because there's only so much influence social media has, and the internet has as well. It's real influence. People actually talking about it to each other. That makes the real influence of what's happening with wrestling. And it's interesting that it's not as easy to do as it is like football or UFC or NASCAR or whatever other sports you have out there. But you have to realize there's a sport, and every other sports organization doesn't do everything that their fan base likes. We have more than enough complaints about the NFL, the NBA, UFC, Major League Baseball. Absolutely. There's just so much. When you talk about, they should change the rules, or they should have certain rules that are out there, and certain players should get certain players. Well, it's their money. It's their decision. They're going to go, and you know what? When we're rooting for a team, we're rooting for the team good or bad. And you know what? You can try to say there's certain things that you feel like your team should do, and you could be vocal about it, but it doesn't matter. Because if it doesn't make the money, it doesn't matter. There was a time with WWE, WCW, you can even say ECW in that matter as well, in the late 90s, where that audience that was being drawn in because of the result of the diehard fan base of multiple organizations and the interest in wrestling, because it got viral at that time, early internet, you had people that were really engaged into wrestling, and you had certain stars that everybody started talking about. It was a talk of everybody, and even in mainstream sports in general. So Stone Cold, Undertaker, Rock, you talked about them. You talked about them, and you said, okay, then there's something there. That's more of a draw for everything else. They had big box office draws. And at the time, like, when did WrestleMania start doing the stadiums and start doing it was back in 2010 or so. You sometimes would do certain events that were in bigger arenas. That was, back when Hulk Hogan was around at a time. But, let's say the Sky Dome. Like, you would see certain arenas, but like the actual big stadiums, like MetLife, Hard Rock Stadium, SoFi Stadium, Levi Stadium, like the big shows, New Orleans Superdome. You got to think about who, the size of the audience that they have for these bigger shows. And even at its peak in the late 90s, there was only a handful of events that were in major big venues. But now, WWE is pushing themselves to do more shows in stadiums because they can. Because of the success they have received from doing a Crown Jewel, or doing Super Showdown, or doing WrestleMania, and then going along and saying, well, let's do Royal Rumble. Because remember, certain arenas only had certain shows where they put them in bigger venues. But WrestleMania has been doing bigger venues for over a decade now, right? And now, Royal Rumble started getting pushed to bigger arenas. Minute Maid Park,
before the pandemic. And then you start seeing, oh, look, Raymond James Stadium they used, which would have been a full crowd if not for the way the pandemic was going on earlier this year. But now they're going to go to St. Louis, the old St. Louis Dome. They're going to go there. They're looking at going to Cardiff, Wales, and London to go to Wembley Stadium and I forget the other stadium they were talking about, but doing a UK tour and going into some big stadiums. Crown Jewel, doing the show in Saudi Arabia. That's another, 50, 70, 60, 70,000 people right there. Major gates. And you don't have that level of talent. Like you might have at the time, if Vince McMahon and all were very ambitious, when Stone Cold and The Rock were headlining WrestleMania, or Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, whatever, you could have filled the arenas they're doing now. You could have probably taken the risk and try to build those big stadium shows. But those stars are more or less come and gone. None of them could come back. And now we're getting the reverse. So you don't have the star power of the Attitude Era that you can use at your disposal now like you have to really build a big show. Like, okay, you want to get The Rock, you want to get John Cena? Well, you're going to have to pay, and you're going to have to find the chance for them to make time to come down and do the show. You want to get Brock Lesnar, you got to pay him. You want to get, whoever. You think Goldberg's still a draw? He's a reason why he's always around for the big shows? That's what they do. And so my point is, this company, they have to go somewhere else to get that crowd. They have to do something else with what they've been doing with their talent to get those seats filled. And who they have relied on for many years, well, that audience base. See, the IWC, listen, they've been around. It wasn't, you don't get credit for what you did, because at one time the IWC did lure 10 million viewers collectively across all wrestling shows to watch. Like there was a time where you had that 11 million viewers at one time. We had that 1998. It's been a long time ago since that. Now collectively 3 to 4 million. So we're not even half of that, not even a third almost. Now who's going to go ahead and get that audience to these shows? Who are the draws? Well, WWE for a long time, they have learned they don't want to just be synonymous with their talent. They want to be synonymous of the brand, that the brand surpasses the talent. The name WrestleMania surpasses the talent. That just saying we're going to hold a Royal Rumble, we're going to hold a WrestleMania, we're going to hold a SummerSlam, that is more than enough, you would think, to get people to already go to pre-sale and start buying tickets. And not all of those are going to be the IWC. Some of those are going to just watch it pirated, or they're going to watch it on Peacock because it's $5 a month. So you did have the higher ticket price for pay-per-views back then. That is where WWE made their money. But now they're only charging so much on the pay-per-views. Now they're going to try to make money on the gate. So what can we do to increase? So we got the Peacock deal. We have our content in one place, but we're not making much money off of it. We're doing a shared revenue deal with Peacock, or we just sold it out because of the rights, and that's all we get. So WWE's thought process is they're not going to make much more than what they already got right now, budgeted out for their television, for their content, for what's on the air or on streaming. That's in place. They have to do things to make more revenue. So one thing I'm hoping for is they're not going to go back to full house shows and go back to a long, grueling schedule like before. Maybe they will. Who knows? They'll do tours, things like that. But I think if they keep themselves where they are right now, just like AEW is doing right now, with the shows that they're doing, well, they're having to go ahead and hit every city around the country and do 4 or 5 shows a week. I don't think they'll be able to get to do that again. I don't know if it's something that they want to do again. So what they're going to do is, with their major shows, now, it's a good and a bad, because if they do the bigger shows, what they're going to do is, because you have Royal Rumble, Money in the Bank, and other shows coming up, you're going to build expectations that the IWC is always going to put pressure on you, but then your partners and everybody else, you can't embarrass yourselves. Vince cannot feel the embarrassment of having a show not fill to capacity when it's a WrestleMania, SummerSlam, now Royal Rumble, now Money in the Bank. Because now, for their bigger pay-per-views, they're trying to go ahead and sell out stadiums. More often than not. They have to have the talent. They have to have the bodies. And you know what? This audience that watches now, 1.7, 1.8 million for Raw, 2.4 million at the peak for SmackDown. If you're going to get a little bit, if you want to add the extra peak of people that are truly interested when they do a show that has some big talent in there, WrestleMania level, okay, let's say 2 million solid for Raw. Let's say 2.5 million solid for SmackDown. That's it for America. And then out of that pot, you're going to have to hope that you're going to get those diehard fans to convince their family members, their friends, and other circles of friends to come to the shows and spend the money. And then you have to convince them, well, who is going to be at the show? And you ask yourself, well, what are you going to have? Who are the people right now that you're looking at that are going to be like, absolutely, oh, okay, these are the stars that are going to be a big deal? Because you could try, right? I mean, who are they going to be familiar with in mainstream society? They know John Cena. They know Roman Reigns. They probably know Becky Lynch. They probably know Randy Orton, among others. But then you also have to look at what the crowd's going to be responding to. Who are they going to care about? Who's going to be coming out of the entrance? Well, when you look at what has changed now on the WWE Championship, it's a focus of me right now, which I said during Extreme Rules, if they were going to pull the match on Monday night where Big E was going to take on Lashley, I thought it would be a transitional change, that Big E was not going to stay champion, that we're going to go ahead and have Lashley take the belt back. Well, whether I like it or not, they chose that Big E was going to hold on to that title. And the Big E is who they're standing behind to stay champion. Okay. They did it. A solid, clean win over Lashley, steel cage, a definitive end to that feud. And immediately, those two stars are on different agendas, because as soon as you deal with Lashley, he already had a thing where Goldberg is already starting to talk up to him now. That's already set up for him at Crown Jewel. And then for Big E, Drew McIntyre comes out because now Bobby Lashley is no longer champion and no longer has to worry about Bobby Lashley being in the championship picture. Drew McIntyre now will get his chance to get his belt back. So stories are made. Fine. You did it. But my thing was, what was Big E's reaction when you looked at it? First thing when he comes out to Raw, when he comes out at 8 o'clock to come out and take on Bobby Lashley, tell me about that crowd response. Lukewarm. Big E gets a mid-card response. This is your champion. He doesn't get the kind of response. Bobby Lashley gets a championship response as a heel. He gets a response. Roman Reigns absolutely gets a response. Becky Lynch absolutely gets a response. Charlotte Flair absolutely gets a response. Did Bianca Belair get the level of response? Probably amongst the kids, probably amongst a certain audience, she was a bit better. Rhea Ripley, did she get a response? No, not really. You're not having any problem hearing "This Is My Brutality" being drowned out over a sea of fans in adulation. No. Nikki ASH, did you get any of that? No. That's what I'm talking about. But that's where we are. Drew McIntyre gets quite a bit of a response, and actually got a good response at WrestleMania. And, as a champion, he does get the response. But are those stars all collectively able to be enough? Well, obviously, the company doesn't feel like they have the trust that these stars are enough on their own to fill a stadium. If you had to rely on, and everybody talks about 100,000 fans, AT&T Stadium, Arlington, Texas, the home of the Dallas Cowboys, got to fill that bad boy up. Do you think if you had matches where you headlined Roman Reigns, Charlotte Flair, Big E, and Becky Lynch, can you fill it? You got to ask yourself, can they fill that stadium? You know what Vince McMahon's going to do. He's going to bring back Brock. He's going to try to bring back Rock. He's going to try to bring back John Cena. If he can get Undertaker to do another match, he'll do that too. If he needs Goldberg, all hands on deck, which means the part-timers. And aren't you guys tired of the part-timers? By the way, NXT, for those of you that don't like what they've done in the last 3 weeks, NXT, here's what happened. Since 2010, all right, when basically the bulk of the Attitude Era stars faded away because they moved along. Rock moved along to Hollywood. Other stars that might not be able to go to work. Edge got hurt. You had a change of stars, and you had some stars who were coming into play that still did bring some of an audience. CM Punk, obviously, Daniel Bryan, to a point, not at the level where he is now, but you look at what they had and what they were trying to build up to. Randy Orton, But what happened was that, they still had certain things about, SmackDown always had the book of stars into the 2000s that really people got behind, along with the WCW stars, the ones that stayed around and were able to work until they got to a certain point. But then you just had the fading of stars. And then NXT came in and did fill a void at a time when it needed to. Because remember, right there 2011, 2012, 2013, they needed to get some new stars up because this was a response to the fact that Deep South Wrestling and OVW and Florida Championship Wrestling was not turning out the stars that they needed. So they did the NXT model, put some real effort into it, built that performance center, and really put something into play. And then you got some results out of that. The original crop of NXT, the Wyatt family, The Shield, Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, Paige, Charlotte Flair, Alexa Bliss, you have to consider there. Bayley, of course, you got to consider there. There's a lot of stars they built out of that. That's a good crop of stars that are still prominent today, but not at the level where they could be box office. Some of them did. Like, it took a long time to get Roman Reigns turned around. Now he is at a right spot. But they need more in the headline. More names on the marquee that are standout box office. And I'm sorry, but Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly and Roderick Strong and Bobby Fish and Pete Dunne, Tommaso Ciampa, Johnny Gargano, those names are never going to fill stadiums. Not at that level. I'm not talking about Arthur Ashe Stadium. I'm talking about the large football stadiums, the large baseball stadiums that will hold 50, 60, 70 to 100,000 people that you can send over to the UK and they're going to fill it up. You have to really consider that. Can that be a reality? The expectations. The fans don't care about that. The diehard IWC fans, they only care about their own instant gratification because they were ingrained by the Attitude Era for instant gratification. The fact that we don't like the championship contenders matches, well, that's because we have to have something that matters to something. We can't have squash matches like we did. You just can't go backwards. When you gave away championship matches on television, that's also part to Eric Bischoff because he gave instant gratification. Vince and Eric together in the war, they had ramifications. They had consequences to their actions because they broke the mold of professional wrestling and how you build stars. Because then they had the hot shot book because they had to build for a war to stay alive. and one company did not. So because of what happened there, the process still stays in place. Some of those ideas stay in place because we remember when Raw could get 7 to like 8 million viewers in America, not to mention the rest of the world who was watching their show on tape delay or whatever it was. It's a big global audience they had. And now they're not watching as much on live. They're not watching shows live anymore like they used to. Because the one thing is, it's supposed to be live sports, but when it's predictable and there's not new things that are happening and there are not the stars or the level of excitement that's surrounding and the importance, the prestige of the matches, when you don't have that, what are you going to do? There was a time where the fans get the benefit of the doubt, and Vince and Hunter and the rest of the people in WWE could follow along as a focus study and give the audience what they more or less wanted. Or at least they would respond to the outcry of the IWC if things didn't happen a certain way. You know, part of that was the case. But fans are fickle, and fans want things a certain way. They want certain people put over, even when it's not good for business. You don't like the best for business line, well, that's where we are now. The IWC doesn't have the pull that they used to have anymore. We're not 22 years ago or 23 years ago. We're not NWO against Destination X anymore. That's not happening. Those days are long gone. So the IWC, in terms of business, doesn't matter anymore. They're irrelevant. And part of it is also because people have lived fat in the trough of legacy. Yeah, you lived off the legacy. You've enjoyed where things are, and you have been able to, in some cases, dictate where things go. Where things went with CM Punk, where things went with Daniel Bryan, there was an influence. And that influence did matter for a long time. But the audience that surrounded that influence, if you still had the audience base that could still be brought in, hey, if there's a big show going on, like, okay, for instance, Big E, he's going to go he's going to put the title up against Bobby Lashley. Well, where are the other fans, the IWC, where are they trying to draw people in to get to watch this show to pop a big rating? I mean, where is the crowd coming in to get 500,000, 1 million extra viewers, get that Raw rating up to a 2.5 and show, hey, wrestling fans still care. It's real to us, damn it. Well, they don't show up anymore. Partly is because of the fact that cable doesn't matter much anymore, and people can watch all their clips on social media, so you don't have to worry about that. But the fact that the shows aren't able to get a pop rating, even with all that going on, well, that's not good. But that's where we are. Let me go ahead and check into Wrestling Observer and Figure 4 Online. They mentioned that with the 2 championship matches starting at ending the show, second in Steel Cage, Raw still fell from last week, 1.71 million viewers. Meanwhile, Monday Night Football got 14.47 million viewers, ruled 18-34, 18-49. Hour 1.82 million viewers. So 20 minutes unopposed with Monday Night Football. They watched to see that match. But it didn't come back to watch the match in the Steel Cage. The initial audience, the diehard fan base at 10 o'clock, 1.6. That's below average of their normal show, of their lowest levels. And by the way, The Miz on Dancing with the Stars, almost 5 million viewers on network TV. And who's watching that? Keep that in mind. 1.6 million viewers. That's for Big E sandwiching the show. It's more because it's Big E the champion, not so much Bobby Lashley, who was champion before. Now, it doesn't mean much because of the ratings still being where it was, but also Bobby Lashley, for the most part, holding that belt during the pandemic, where the ratings were just meager because we were still in the Thunderdome. But for the fact that we have this live audience again, the excuses of having the audience, the ratings go dropping, Hey, John Cena is able to pull people in. Bobby Lashley didn't let the audience go below the normal benchmark. Big E holding the belt, it went down. Do we want to blame Monday Night Football because of that? I mean, if Big E was such a big deal, I am not blaming him. It's the company's fault. And this is where I'm going to come into next. But Big E is not a big enough deal as a champion to make people go and watch this show. Roman Reigns, he's a big enough deal. That show, if you take Roman Reigns off of SmackDown, he's just not there for whatever reason, they're not getting too many viewers. They're not. He is the draw. He is the draw. He is the draw. He commands box office. People come and pay to see him. They're not paying to see Big E. And why is that? Look at the way that Big E's been booked. Because remember, after that IC title run, where he drops the belt to Apollo Crews, and then he goes off and really, they didn't do much with him in a solo run. We talked about him taking on Sheamus, okay, but it's the Money in the Bank. So it didn't really matter about building him up. So the Money in the Bank briefcase, the fact that he won it, sure, that's a mark. The IC title, yeah, that's adding value to him as a potential main eventer. But never got towards the main event. Instead, leading up to Roman Reigns taking on Edge or taking on Finn Balor, it's him with the briefcase. And then he doesn't even bother to go and cash in the briefcase. That's the other thing. Remember, the briefcase isn't even bothered being cashed in on Roman Reigns because he was on SmackDown the whole time and teased it as such in front of Paul Heyman for weeks. Do we remember that? So instead, he goes over to the Raw brand to go after the WWE Championship, to cash in the briefcase there. Successfully does, to his credit. But nobody was ready for him to be there because what has the company done in terms of booking the storyline to build him up? He's been a solo star for less than a year. And as far as we're concerned, they still have to attach him to the New Day. Because Big E standalone doesn't have the push the Big E is. Big E as part of New Day is a box office draw. They are. Big E by himself is not. That is the fault of this company. Now, if you want to keep Big E as champion, then keep rolling New Day out together collectively. That's all you can do. But him by himself doesn't make sense because the crowd did not amp up until we saw it wasn't the Hurt Business, and there's no explanation for that to come back. Like, we know, and that's another problem we could nitpick as well. No logical explanation for the Hurt Business coming back. We all remember how that broke up. And so we're just supposed to, like, revisionist history, forget about that, and all of a sudden he comes back because we know what's going on. Oh, 3-on-3. Got it. So maybe it's not for the individual storyline, but they wanted to put them together anyway. Standoff between Hurt Business and New Day. That's it. Is it for a week before the draft? Could be. We don't know. But we see this, what's going on. It's just by themselves. It doesn't make a difference at all. Because Big E had to be attached to the New Day to matter. To be a bigger importance to the audience. And that's because Big E still is attached to New Day because of what they did. And then he comes over to Raw, he wins the title there. Now he can go ahead and frolic with New Day. So the team, the band's back together. But they're better. They're as a trio. And they never did anything. And this is also a problem where Big E still is attached to the New Day. He never turned heel. Maybe if he would have turned him heel and then go back to a face or something like that, but he should have been a heel. But they're not going to let him do that because I guess that's not what he wants. And we can also go with we're so happy for him. Like it's a feel-good moment. Kofi winning the belt when he was WWE champion. That's a feel-good moment. Okay, Finn Balor winning the Universal title. That's a feel-good moment. It doesn't matter in the lexicon of what is business, of who is going to be the stars are going to build up that are going to be big deal when they go somewhere else. Finn Balor actually, to the credit, when he had his title match against Roman Reigns, that mattered. People were into that. Finn Balor, with that entrance, he means something. He's a big deal. And they should recognize that. And they protected him as a result because they see there's something with Finn Balor. Even by putting him in NXT for a while and then letting him come back, there's something there with Finn Balor that matters. So we need to keep him strong. But they also need to build more. Okay? Because Finn Balor losing to Roman Reigns in the fashion he did still looks stronger than Big E does. And Big E's the champion. He's holding a title. But do you feel like did he run to the roster to get it? Like, did he really chase? Same thing with Bianca Belair. Same thing with Rhea Ripley. Did they actually chase? Did you get to go through the trouble of seeing them? Listen, Daniel Bryan, when they screwed him over in the Royal Rumble with Roman Reigns, and that WrestleMania match, the two matches he had to do with Triple H and Batista to win that belt, that mattered a lot. I remember it wasn't too long before, a couple years before, that I had him paired up with AJ Lee, and he loses in like 30 seconds at WrestleMania to Sheamus in the opening match. But Daniel Bryan clawed his way through, made his way through, and became ultimately a star. Because that's a star they made. No question about it. And part of what they got right now with Bryan Danielson over in AEW is what was made of him. A little bit of what was his Ring of Honor face, that's the wrestling level. But the stardom, the star power he has, that was created by WWE. But Big E doesn't have that. And neither do some of these other stars that they have not done a proper job of making them chase. The old school thing of having a babyface. Chase to earn through overcoming the odds to become champion. Sammy Guevara went through a lot of odds to overcome to become champion because they had him on there and he had done a lot. But they made him a champion and they'd done a lot with him. Had a lot of great matches to work his way. So that TNT title, having the chance to go and do this, he'd been around working hard for that company. Here you're going to have the chance. You're going to run with The Rock. But Sammy Guevara originally got over. From the time he came into that company day one to now, he's over. And now he's really over. He's a star. They crowned him. They made him a star. And AEW, when their storylines, they matter. It's not so much the storylines even necessarily that WWE has to get right. They have to get the feuds right. They have to do the right thing in booking who gets over and keeping people strong. You having your IC title, constantly having people lose when they're IC champion. Like right now, Damian Priest, he's staying strong, continues to win. That's important. But when you have some hot shot booking just to get to the belt, listen, Bianca Belair, this is the other thing that got to be mentioned too, is the fact that there are certain things that they do in order to create contenders or to create championship opportunities. Part of that is not helping. The Money in the Bank briefcase has not helped everybody. Just because they overcame in one match, then the Royal Rumble, the same thing, the championship opportunity. Just because they got that there should not just automatically, just because they won Royal Rumble, just because they won Money in the Bank, automatically, that's more than enough to make that person become a box office star. No. Becky Lynch didn't go that way. I remember Becky Lynch, they went through a lot of crap with her, trying to create her heel, and nobody wanted to make her heel, and also worked her. Everybody wants to complain about Becky Lynch trying to be this heel now, but let's not forget what she did to become the champion she is now, to become the star that she is now. She worked her ass off. Let's not forget, she might have been a little bit of a sellout to some people now, but she still worked her ass off all this time. Seth Rollins, to that matter, too, has worked his ass off. He's, something's got to be said where Seth Rollins you could put into the main event. He still matters. Like I said, his feud with Edge still means something because I thought it was really, those guys have worked amazing together. Seth Rollins is still championship material. He is still main event level in my eyes. And I believe he's done a pretty good job of elevating when he has had a chance. I mean, there's been some matches where it just didn't matter. Like Cesaro, you're working with somebody that's a good hand, but you're not going to build that guy back up. And they did it also because Cesaro was kind of teasing to go after Roman Reigns. Then Seth Rollins comes into play. But, nobody's talking about the fact that with Roman Reigns, all right, the fact that if Brock Lesnar loses to Roman Reigns, and everybody talks about the fact that Roman Reigns does not have a credible opponent, that no one's going to be able to beat him. There's still Seth Rollins. Has anybody even thought about that? Seth Rollins can still be easily heated up to be champion. He's credible. He's been champion. That guy's gone through everything. And the storyline with the Shield. And he's already teased. There was already a seed planted about talking about if he won Money in the Bank. And the fact that he wants to be champion, that he could still go ahead and beat Roman Reigns. Nobody wants to talk about that Seth Rollins could take on Roman Reigns. That would be, you could make that a WrestleMania match. Why not? Imagine, you could absolutely easily, a kindergartner could make a storyline with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns if they knew what was going on. If they knew enough of the story and say, okay, plot a couple of dots, connect them together, show me. Nobody wants to talk about that, but you know what? Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, that's a match that's in the can. You can do that anytime you want. To the credit, when Drew McIntyre came back, he had to work his way back up. Remember, Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley, hell, they left the company and came back better than before. And WWE actually took advantage of the of the star power they actually kind of attained going to Impact Wrestling, because they did elevate themselves. They made themselves more serious, more credible. Enough for Vince to say, yeah, bring them back. Drew McIntyre came in a different wrestler when he came back to the company. Finally met his potential, became champion. Drew McIntyre is a box office guy. You could really build, but it's also depending on the matches you have. And I mean, he lost to Bobby Lashley. WrestleMania matters. But you could very well go ahead and Drew McIntyre win over Big E, and he takes a spot, and that's going to be mattering, Drew McIntyre got the win over Brock Lesnar. He also was able to knock out Brock Lesnar at Royal Rumble. I mean, there's a lot of things that matter with Drew McIntyre. They build him up. But they have to do that. They just can't. And this is also with rehashed stars that have come back that were part of the original plan in the 2010s to eventually, if they would have stayed around, would have been built up to be a main event level. Possibly. Or they would have given up on. But the chip on the shoulder brought them back hungry. Big E's been in the system for a long time. So this is where Big E, much like Kofi Kingston to that matter, they've been around the system for a long time, for over 10 years, both of them. And it's basically like saying here, you earned a spot. You're not at the level of the box office where we could draw millions of dollars off of you, but you know what? You deserve a run you deserve a run as a champion. You've been doing everything we wanted to do in this company, so you get to run with The Rock. But you should know very well that we can't let you hold on to that because, this is where we are recognizing you. We're endorsing, we're validating your value to this company. That's what Kofi got with his 6-month run. That's what Big E's getting with his run. The women's belts, it's a different story. The fact that Rhea Ripley or Bianca Belair got the belt, as they did, or Nikki Ash got the belt for a short while, that's just hot potato. That's just hot potatoing the belt. That's all it is. Because Becky Lynch wasn't there. Becky Lynch could have probably held onto the belt, or Asuka would have held onto the belt for a long time, because those two are box office. And now Becky Lynch is back. She's holding on to that belt. Immediately, as soon as Becky Lynch was going to be brought back, at the time they decided to bring her back, immediately put the belt back on her. So that's why you didn't even bother to see any build-up of Becky Lynch coming back up. And with Bianca Belair, at least she had Sasha Banks out there working the WrestleMania feud to lead up to it. But without Sasha, and then you bring back Becky, yeah, you're gonna eventually put the belt back on Becky. So I'm trying to think about the fact that, you know what? They could have done it better. They could have done better by Bianca, but Becky means people to come in the seats. It's asses in the seats. They always talk about it. She does. That's what they all do. And you look at the rest of that roster, and you're just trying to think, okay, what about the stars they have right now and they're trying to build up? You look at Raw, you obviously, they're trying to do work on Karrion Kross. Do people like what they're doing with him with the helmet and all that? No, but you know what? Look past the aesthetics. They're doing something with him. And he can get over. And I think it's going to be a day where he'll shed that helmet and all that bullshit he have on him. And he'll get to go and flourish as the guy we all know he is. The talent he is meant to be. Because he should be a big deal. They're trying to do things with him. They're taking with him. Yeah. Who knows? Rite of passage. Who knows what it might be? You got Keith Lee now turning into Bearcat. An homage of Bearcat, right? Hey, if it makes him the level of Ron Simmons or Ernie the Cat Lad, hey, those guys mattered. They brought asses to seats. If they can do it, go with what worked. You know, Vincent and Bruce and all those people, they're going to do what they're going to do. The fact you don't like it. But also the company, it's not just creative. So creative can just do the bullshit with the bad storylines that they make right now. But it's the characters themselves. Like, you got to overlook the creative altogether. We know it's always going to be bad. We know there's going to be some illogical things of what they're going to do. And how they're going to book week to week is going to suck. Hasn't been so bad lately. But you know they're never going to be able to sustain like that. You know it. But they have to do things right now. If they're going to have 8 big shows a year, as Sean Ross Sapp at Fightful.com has reported, 8 shows a year. That means across the year, they have to keep the level of interest up. They have to keep the intensity of momentum. The momentum has to be up. The modus operandi, the MO of this company has to be, we need to be working to all those shows. You automatically made Money in the Bank now. The fact that it's going to a bigger arena, you're saying, oh shit, we need to make a big deal out of this. We just can't throw a bullshit show together. They actually have to book a super card 8 times a year now. Not even 3 like they've done before. And the fact that, oh, okay, you know, Super Showdown, yeah, pretty big booked, but nothing was going to really change. Crown Jewel, nothing's going to really change. Probably not. But they still did it. Now they're going to have to build these big stadium shows. You have to be able to put people in the seats. And the IWC cannot fill those stadiums by themselves. They don't. They will not. So the influence they have is less than before. That's how it is. Let me put this story out here that I just mentioned before. I'm going to take this from Give Me Sport. The fact that we have these shows now where they are. The plan is 8 nights of stadium shows in 2022. So they're going to be doing 8 nights of stadium shows. Now, it's important to note that SAP isn't reporting that 8 separate WWE shows are going to be held in stadiums. Some scope for events to be held over 2 nights again. But they're still going to be held in big venues, no matter what. The Royal Rumble will be held at the Dome in St. Louis next year. One of the stadium shows the company puts on. Then you have AT&T Stadium in Texas to host WrestleMania 38. SummerSlam will be next year. Oh, sorry. Remember, Money in the Bank will be at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. You know, SummerSlam will also be in a bigger venue next year. 2 more events in Saudi Arabia. and 2 events in the UK. The other stadium show is set to be a huge pay-per-view in the UK. A recent report has claimed that the company is going to be holding a pay-per-view in the UK in September 2022, hoping to fit 90,000 fans into a stadium. Now let's go into what they actually have said here. The story we had heard from Give Me Sport as well is they're talking about that they might be hosting. First, one place was saying Wembley Stadium, which that's a big place, 78,000. The other one they're talking about is Cardiff and Wales Principality Stadium. And supposedly they've been working on that venue for a number of months. What Culture first broke the news of holding the pay-per-view next year in the UK. Sources tell TalkSport that though it's the WWE's preferred venue, Principality Stadium, nothing is final right now. It's even possible that the show could hold a stadium show in the UK that is in SummerSlam. Either way, plans for a WWE pay-per-view in the UK are looking very positive after last week. And it's understood that WWE held meetings regarding the plans last week during the UK tour, and Drew McIntyre was a part of them. 8 shows. So you have to fill those stadiums. And right now, if you had Big E in the main event, he's not drawing. Could he even draw just a regular arena for Raw? What if he didn't have Lashley right now? And Randy Orton right now is not cleared to wrestle. I mean, if you had to have Big E go up against somebody else, it wouldn't matter who you put him up against as opposed to him just being a title defense. Let me put it to you like this. If it was just a squash match, you just knew that at a stadium or at an arena, you knew that Big E was going to be in action. And it didn't matter who it was going to be. But the fact he was going to be there. Are you going to put down $50, $60, $100, or $500 for gold circle seats to go watch Big E in action? Just him? What if it was with New Day? Ask yourself that. This all has to be considered. Roman Reigns, different story. Becky Lynch, probably a different story. That's where we are. And that's why I have to make this point. So I got to talk about the draft in a couple of minutes because that's one more thing we got to go and talk about. But the other thing I got to bring up as well is NXT. So the changes that have been made. I already talked about NXT a little bit earlier. And the stars that they had before, the black and gold, and turning it to what it is now. So, I heard Bustin' Open, and you hear Dave LaGreca talking about, they should put the show back the way it was, 1 hour on the network. It should be on USA live. Well, sure, you're going to see some stars that are green, might not do so well, but the matches don't have to be necessarily the focus. It's the storylines and what they do in terms of the promo ability and what they're doing to build stories there. Because they're obviously trying to build stories more because the developing of stars there is crucial. Because you have to build a story. You have to build some depth and character based on who, on somebody that's absolutely brand new. They don't do that so much on Raw or SmackDown at all. But on NXT 2.0, you see what they're trying to do. And you obviously see some stars that will have an upside down the line. Look at Braun Breaker, Toxic Attraction. And then you just hope and see what's going to happen with, say, Legado del Fantasma or Hit Row. Who stands out from that? Because they're all going to come up. You're just going to see who's going to come to the cream of the crop, rise to the top, and will get picked up and go to the main roster, wherever they're going to go. But it's obvious that the company's more worried about creating gimmicks, creating characters, because then you have the characters that are going to stand out more over what they're doing. And look what they're doing. When you look at Happy Corbin, there's another example of a full gimmick built on. They don't want to base on reality anymore. They want to build characters. Roman Reigns being based on the Samoan heritage, head of the table, the bloodline. Big E's not a character. Big E is just Big E. He's a real person. The fact they want to get Karrion Kross and try to build him into some kind of gladiator or something like that, to try to do something with him. there's not room in WWE, it looks like right now, to have, I mean, think about it. What they're going to do is they're going to go with what kids used to go for before. The stars we used to have growing up. Like a Hulk Hogan, larger-than-life character. Macho Man Randy Savage. Roddy Piper. That's what they're going to build off on. I mean, they're not necessarily going to go to the mold of a Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, or The Rock. But again, Rock was a standalone character. Stone Cold was a standalone character. Undertaker, standalone character. With gimmicks. Catchphrases. And a whole cadre of different things that encompass who the character, what the gimmick is. That's what they're going to rely on more than the realism of just having real wrestlers out there. So the fact that let Adam Cole, who didn't have a gimmick, Bryan Danielson, except for the real Daniel Bryan, didn't really have a gimmick. When you look at CM Punk, who didn't have a gimmick, notice the stars they had. Okay, Aleister Black, they couldn't do anything right with the gimmick. Bray Wyatt absolutely had a gimmick, but they ruined it. That's where they are. They're going to build off of characters and gimmicks. They're going to build so that it's going to be like, kind of like finding the superheroes. Almost like finding superheroes for the adults, the millennials, or the younger Gen Z types, to the cosplay types that the Gen Z might like really get into, to the kids that'll like the characters they might want to dress up as at Halloween. Do you have to consider all that? And you know what? That's not the IWC style. IWC is stuck in old fashioned. Like, so most of the IWC, they probably still listen to metal music. As if it's new. Like, even if it's new metal music, they're still listening to metal. They're still wearing black t-shirts like it's the 90s. Well, it's not like that anymore. We're in a different deck. We're in a different millennium. And so it's not so much the changes being made that are going to be Vince's vision. Vince is still going to have the wherewithal and the vision of how to create a star, which is what he has to still be able to do. With the disadvantage of being handicapped with not being able to put real tangible storylines together, they're not going to do what AEW does. AEW does because they need to do that for the wrestlers to get over. So they're going to do that. But WWE's not going to do that. They're going to do something different. They have a different way of doing things. It's not the cup of tea that the IWC wants. But then what they're going to have to do is, for WWE to go ahead and be able to go and fill those seats, like if it was me in that position to be able to go and fill those stadiums, automatically, you want to go to that Principality Stadium, you want to fill up Allegiant Stadium, you want to fill up the Dome in St. Louis, you want to fill up AT&T Stadium, you want to fill those up? You're not going to do it with this current crop of audience. And second, you're not going to be able to rely on the part-timers to bail you out. Because those stars are only going to go so far. Goldberg can barely do anything. Undertaker more or less is retired. John Cena is working like a madman. So is The Rock. You're not going to get them. Batista's not coming back. You're lucky that Edge has come back from all what he's done to come back over here. But even he has a shelf life. So you got to ask yourself, who's going to fill the void? At some point, you can't ask on these part-timers to come back. You can't rely on this. You have to have something down the line in the next year or two. What if you have injuries, God forbid? Remember, we haven't had the stars, except for in the pandemic. How many of them were getting truly injured? They're not working the road like they were before, which I think is also a thing that's going to be very important, where the way things are, it's going to take a long time before WWE starts doing the house shows like they do, to where the wrestlers are working a really grueling travel schedule and working a lot. It's better that they're not working that kind of schedule. There's a lack of injuries right now of what they're doing. Plus, if they don't have to have wrestlers working a full, on wrestling style, they can minimize the number of moves and minimize the things that they're doing in the ring. Then they can probably minimize the amount of injuries that some of these stars are getting. And they don't have to worry about them being on the shelf and being hurt all the time. Those are other things you could be considering. So with all that, this is why the company should just follow along with the trend, with the direction they're going. I'm supporting where they're going with. I can see what they're trying to do. I can understand what they're trying to do. The logic makes sense. What isn't logical is their storylines. What isn't logical is their creative. But what they're doing right now in terms of business, they're putting themselves on the line, and they're going to have to pressure themselves to make sure they can pay off on these big stadium shows. Because the other thing that's most important is that you're going to get these towns to take these big shows and revenue that comes with it, and the backing of the broadcast partners being a part of all this. You're luring. Remember, if you want the broadcast fees and the rights like the NFL gets or what NASCAR gets, they sell out major stadiums all the time. So WWE has to be able to show, well, we don't have to go and do what the NBA does and fill out 15,000 seat arenas. No, if we need to do it once a month, we can sell out 100,000 seats just like that. And that says a lot to the investors. That says a lot to the broadcast partners. It's like, oh shit, these guys can put 100,000 seats like nothing. Snap of a finger. They have all hands on deck available to fill stadiums, which is what no other wrestling company was able to do on a consistent basis. Well, WWE is trying to do it. Very ambitious effort. But if they want to do what they're going to do, they're going to have to neglect and ignore the IWC influence. The vocal minority. They at one point were the majority, but the IWC is now the vocal minority. Their bark isn't as much as their bite. I'm not trying to diss the IWC. I really am not. But WWE, you can tell the IWC doesn't matter anymore. All you guys on wrestling Twitter, wrestling TikTok, even myself, we don't matter like WWE used to make us matter. Used to think of us. They don't look at fans like myself like they did anymore. Because they don't need us. Stay around and watch the show. But we're trying to build for the next generation of fans. Because there is a ceiling as to how many people can watch the show right now. And that's their audience base right now, the what's left. They have to build another fan base. They have to build new fans organically. And with what they've been doing the last 20 years, it's not working. They have to do something different. And they are. NXT is an ambitious effort to go back to that. They're making some big changes in the Raw and SmackDown. They're tightening up the ship. They're micromanaging. They're very efficient right now. And this is where things are going to be. So I wish them the best of luck. I'm still going to be here doing this show, talking about it. But I'm going to be in the understanding that I don't mean as much as all these other podcasters think they are. Okay? Sure. A lot of podcasters bigger than me, they might be able to get 20, 30, 40, 50, 100,000 views. The dirt sheets might feel like they have a lot of influence on what's going on. Right? The Observer and Pro Wrestling Torch and, PW Insider or Fightful or whatever. Like all those publishers, all those journalists, the dirt sheets, all the IWC, and the influence you think you have, all of you fan shows, the one that I've supported and I have talked about for many years on this program, we don't matter as much anymore. Which is why it always mattered to me to always support all organizations, not put all my chickens in one basket. No, all my eggs in one basket. That's what I meant. Because WWE, I've always said, we want them to be successful. I want them to be successful because it helps wrestling overall. Because it puts the spotlight back on wrestling again. The success of WWE is behooving to help the success of AEW. Because I don't know if AEW pulls an audience on their own organically. What they're getting right now is retaining back fans that have been jilted by what WWE has done. So there's an audience for that. And they've been able to do some things where they have some stars that are going to resonate with a younger audience because they're playing to the culture, which makes sense. So that's a different way of doing it. But WWE is not going to do that. They're going to go their own way. They're going to go back to the drawing board of what that's worked for them because it can still work. And they have a different thought process on how to bring younger fans back. And they're doing it. One thing I can tell you is that the crowds are much different than before. But I've come back. You see a lot more families in the crowd. You hear a lot more kids screaming in the crowd. You're seeing the difference. It's not that same old IWC crowd with black shirts on. That crowd is at AEW shows. That crowd is at Ring of Honor. That crowd is at NWA. That crowd is at Impact. And so to see the support for those shows, to build them back up. But we all have our eyes fixed on what WWE is doing. Paying attention to what they're doing because it's going to help the rest of the wrestling business. We have to hope for the best. And we have to understand our influence as a collective, as the internet wrestling community, it's not as big as it was. I've already said it a couple of times. I'm going to repeat it over and over. I'm going to say it for future shows. Vocal minority. That is what we are. We still have some influence because somebody's got to keep watching. But they're more concerned about feeling like, oh, they're going to have an audience that's going to stay watching no matter what. And that is what the IWC does. Because if they're not going to go ahead and watch to enjoy, they're going to watch to complain. And that's what they're going to be able to know that they can have. They know they can retain that audience right there. But then after that, they need the audience members that are going to stick around because they're now new to the product and enjoying it with fresh eyes. It's not so much that wrestling fans are able to get their brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews and friends and circles of friends and coworkers and all that stuff to start buying in. No, they got to find a different way to do it. There you have it. That's going to be doing it for me tonight. I appreciate all of you checking in to the show with me. As always, come back for another Wrestling is Real podcast because wrestling needs us.
Thank you for listening to the Wrestling is Real podcast. You can find all previous episodes at wrestlingisreal.com or subscribe to the show on all major podcast outlets, including Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Follow the King of Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at King of Podcasts, and search King of Podcasts on YouTube, or type youtube.com/JBRASCO951. This has been a presentation of the King of Podcasts Radio Network.